Welcome to the Black Bibliophile podcast. The Black Bibliophile is a podcast where I, Jazz, read and talk about popular and little-known books, comics, zines, and authors. To quote Haruki Murakami, if you only read the books that everyone else is reading, you can only think what everyone else is thinking. And with that, let's start the show. Welcome back to the Black Bibliophile podcast. This is your host, Jazz. Long time no see. I took a random week off. I didn't know I was going to, but life comes at you fast, you guys, and here we are. So, this week's episode, I am going to focus on Mary H.K. Choi's book, Permanent Record, which came out this week. I believe it actually came out today. It came out September 3rd. Let's read the summary and then hop right in. I do want to say before we start that this episode may contain book spoilers. I usually forget to tell everyone that, but yes, this episode may contain book spoilers. And so if you want to read Permanent Record, try to skip those parts. I will try to give warning before I drop a spoiler. But anyways, let us read the summary for Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi. From the New York Times bestselling author of Emergency Contact, which Rainbow Rowell called Smart and Funny, comes an unforgettable new romance about how social media influence relationships every day. On paper, college dropout Pablo Rindy doesn't have a whole lot going for him. His graveyard shift at a 24-hour deli in Brooklyn is a struggle. Plus, he's up to his eyeballs in credit card debt. Never mind the state of his student loans. Pop juggernaut Liana Smart has enough social media followers to populate whole continents. The brand is unstoppable. She graduated from child stardom to become an international icon, and her adult life is a queasy blur of private planes, step and repeats, aspirational hotel rooms, and strangers screaming for her just to notice them. When Liana and Pablo meet at 5 a.m. at the bodega in the dead of winter, it's absurd to think they'd be a thing. But as they discover who they are, who they want to be, and how to defy the deafening expectations of everyone else, Lee and Pab turn to each other, which of course is when things get properly complicated. So I was given this book to read by my local bookshop, Cellar Door Books. You guys should check them out if you haven't. If you live in the Riverside area, Cellar Door Books is the best bookstore in Riverside. They gave me the art to check out to see, again, if they should order this book. So it was kind of like I read it and see if it's like, is it worth spending money and stocking the shelves with? And it's marketed as a YA book, which at first I was like surprised because the characters are much older than usual YA protagonists. They're about in their early 20s. Like Pab sounds better. Pab is like, he's already done 1 year in college and he's already basically spent a year outside of college. So he's around 21 years old. And Liana is, I believe, 23 years old. So these characters are much older, and the scope of this book has a more adult feel. And I was talking at the bookstore with some of the people there trying to figure out where would this book fit. And I think they call it new young adult fiction, which is interesting. So I say all this to say that moments happen that aren't quite like YA safe. Like, they're not full on sex scenes, but there's moments where you're like, is this book really meant for teenagers? Because it doesn't feel like it's meant for teenagers. When I first started reading Permanent Record, I really didn't know what it was about. I refused to read the back of it. I didn't look anything up. I knew the author and I knew Emergency Contact. I knew the author, Mary H.K. Choi, from her work in comics. She's done like Deadpool and a couple other titles. So I knew her work from comics, but I was like, I'm not going to read the back. I just want to be pleasantly surprised about what this book is about. So when I first started reading it, I had no idea it was led by a male protagonist, and I kept getting annoyed, I think, because the image in my head didn't match the voice until I realized the character was male. And then my brain flipped and I was like, oh, this is exactly how dudes would talk. That's why my brain wasn't working, because I saw this like femme person for some reason, because I guess that's like the lead of most YA books, is like a femme lead. Anyways, Pablo Rindi has a very unique voice, and I like the way Mary captures his just like sensibilities and how he is. Her character work is really great, and it's almost surreal. Like, you can feel his night shift dragging on and on and on in the book, in his bodega, and you feel the actual exhaustion in his voice and him just sitting there like there's nothing happening. It's 5 a.m. in New York in the dead of winter, and I'm sitting in a bodega, and then all of a sudden this person walks in clearly expensive clothes, strange and almost ethereal. She seems almost like a hallucination when you're reading it. And I love that part when Liana Smart walks in. In the book, her nickname is Lee. And yeah, their romance, of course, this setup of like, oh, a super pop star falls in love with a normal dude who works in a bodega. This is like the thing of most YA or young adult movies. I forget what that Disney Channel movie was, but it was like the same premise where a normal person falls in love with a superstar. So, and you're like, oh, normal life is tough, but being famous is tougher, that kind of thing. But what I like about this book is Mary kind of flips that trope on its head and makes it more interesting, because Pablo isn't just your normal YA lead. He's drowning in debt, which is very relatable in these times. He's got school debt, he's got credit card debt, and he dropped out of school because he just didn't feel like he could cut it. And so this job he has and the life he leads is mostly Pab trying to hide and ignore his life, because it's better for him not to face it and bury himself in distractions than to actually handle it, get a hold of it. He's just too overwhelmed by everything, so he kind of just gives up and decides like, okay, I'm going to just work in this bodega. I'm just going to keep putting all my eggs in the basket of going back to NYU, even though it's been a couple years, and jumping back into NYU, one of the most expensive private colleges in the United States, and it's highly selective. It's like almost impossible, especially if you dropped out and you don't have the cash to even pay for it because you're drowning in debt from when you were going there. And I like how real Pablo's like life is. I guess I don't like how real it is. It's more I like his struggles are very relatable. Like, he's just drowning in all this stuff, and the only thing he can really do is ignore it, because he doesn't know how to handle it. He doesn't know how to confront those issues. It's like snowballed so far out of control that he can't, but also he's too afraid to ask for help, which I find really interesting. He feels like he doesn't want to burden anybody, doesn't want to be a disappointment, so it's better to just hide it from himself, from everybody else, and pretend nothing's wrong when really his whole world is caving in. Now, the rest of this conversation, I think, will entail some spoilers, so try not to listen if you want to read this book. You should definitely read this book and come back and listen to this episode. But yes, I'm going to carry on, and there probably will be spoilers. 3, 2, 1. All right. So Pablo starts seeing Liana Smart. They meet mysteriously in this bodega. They have a very good conversation. I love their first conversation where they both immediately hit it off. At first, he doesn't recognize who she is, and then immediately it all comes flooding back into his head like, holy crap, this is that Disney Channel star child star who's on every billboard and has a new album and perfume and blah, blah, blah. She's basically like if Taylor Swift, Selena Gomez, and Justin Bieber wrapped into one person. It's like the best way to explain it. She's everywhere. She's all things. She's mega popular. And so the one thing that brings them together is he has a pretty famous, semi-famous Instagram where he posts and pairs snack foods with interesting street fashion. So cool Jordans or something like that. So the colorways of the shoes would match the snack because he works in a bodega and he prides himself on his snack prowess. That's just Pablo's thing. And Liana or Lee hashtags her photo Spelunk, and he hashtags the photo Spelunk because it has like a mini thing to have to do with their conversation they had in the bodega. And they kind of vibe on that level. And then one night she comes back to the bodega while he's about to close. He takes her out to breakfast and she's like, come with me. Come. Just follow me into the abyss, I guess. And he was like, dope. Why not? Because it falls into his whole, I'm going to follow this girl that I am falling for and just forget my life. It's a good distraction for him. He's avoiding the things he needs to get done. Like he has work the next morning. He's supposed to tackle his drawer of mounting bills. He has an interview at a college his mom set up that he needs to go to so he can get his life back on track and figure out what he really wants to do. And he has all these mounting stressors in his life. And then this girl comes out of nowhere and is like, come with me on my private jet to LA and we can just run away from all your troubles, which she doesn't know he has any. He just tells her he's a student at NYU. And that's the end of that. And you can forget about everything and be with me. So, of course, Pablo was like, hell yeah, I'm getting on this plane. We gonna do this. And they go to LA. They spend all this time together and have fun. And he goes back to his life after, which is like a shocker. Like he goes from this luxurious life in LA where everything's taken care of. He gets to meet Liana's family and gets to experience all these wonderful things only to come back to his unsurmountable debt and mountains of stressors. And straight up the fact that he missed this college interview. So now he's avoiding his mom because she set this up. She pulled strings so he can try to get his life on track. And once again, he let her down and he missed a bunch of shifts at the job that he works. So he's coming back to this whole mountain of problems. And it's just getting deeper and deeper. And I like that it starts to show you that Mary H.K. Choi can show you that running away from everything and avoiding life slowly starts to take a toll on Pab, and you can see it. And she also shows that way of life proves to be completely unsustainable. Like you can't avoid everything forever. So what I love about Permanent Record and what I was so surprised about Permanent Record was what the theme of the book is, I guess. So the book's about not just letting life happen to you, but about being an active participant in life and working at what makes you happy, even if it's not the easiest or most conventional path. So Pablo's mom is very strict, very like she's a doctor, and she's like, you just need to do this and get this done. And he and his little brother they feel like they have to do this conventional path in order to be successful, do what his parents did to be successful. And I like that Pablo kind of bucks against that tradition once he tries to get his life together. And he tells his mom, not every path is the same. Not everybody can just do it this way and to be successful. It doesn't always work out. Sometimes you have to take a risk and you have to let us take a risk. You can't push all your expectations on somebody because it's suffocating Pob, and it's suffocating his little brother Rain. So I like that Mary H.K. Choi, it's not only a book about like meeting a superstar, running away with her, falling in love. The book's not even really about that. It's kind of like a tool to help Pablo realize how to deal with his life, how to come to terms with adulthood, really. And I like that about this book because it's so hard to find books that, especially books like romantic, that lead like romantic books that are really just about being an adult. And especially in this new age with like social media, with these insane college bills, these insane credit card bills, the mounting debt you kind of find yourself swallowed in. Pop is like every other 20-something person trying to figure out how to do what they love, find out what they love, how to do what they love, and try not to go broke doing it. And also the book touches on Pablo's struggles with depression, because at first he doesn't realize he's depressed. He doesn't understand or know that he's depressed. He's just like, this is life. This is what I have to deal with. I'm just going to ignore it. And then after all his trips and hangouts with Lee and going from this super amazing life back to his seemingly harder life, he realizes that he's not waking up in the morning, that he only lives to talk to Liana. He's not going to meetings. He stopped going to work. He's just kind of buried in his room, hiding from the world. And I think it's really cool that Mary H.K. Choi can show like depression is normal. Depression is something that does happen, and there's no real easy way to just get out of that funk. There's no easy way to get out of any of this. And it builds up to Pob having to just buckle down and figure his life out. There's no magic fix. There's no anything. The only thing that can make your life better or make things better is you. Nobody's going to swoop in with their cape and save you. You have to save you. And I like that. That's the theme of this book. This book, and Liana is just like a small part of Pablo's journey, realizing that she's not going to save him. Nobody's going to save him. His mom, his dad, his brother, his friends, Mr. and Mrs. Kim at the bodega, none of them can save him. He has to want to save himself and put in the work to fix all of his issues in order to see some kind of growth. And that's what makes this book super dope. I was so surprised. I was expecting not to like this book. I spent a good week with this book because life came at me fast, and I could have probably read it faster, but it's just a really good book about becoming an adult, coming to terms with life, and just figuring your shit out. And I was surprised. And Mary is a great writer. The writer is amazing. The dialogue's completely amazing. You can feel who these people are in every section. Like, they each have their own unique voice. I did like that. When they were the LA segment, when they were driving to Moreno Valley, which is the dumbest pet peeve to ever have, but I live in the Inland Empire, and they kept saying, like, so from LA to Moreno Valley, anytime, it'd be like 2-hour drive. It's just a 2-hour drive. I don't know why. Like, we can say it's 1 hour and 30 minutes if you're not hitting traffic, but 90% of the time, especially if you're taking the 60, because the 60 is like the one road into Moreno Valley, and it's a hot mess, it's gonna be like a 2-hour drive. But in the book, they got there in like an hour or 45 minutes. And I was like, that's wild. And they just kept calling Moreno Valley LA. And I was like, what does this? I don't think Mary H.K. Choi has been to the Inland Empire. But other than that, which is the dumbest pet peeve to ever have ever, that's my one criticism so far of this book, is that section, which is like a chapter in the book. So just so you know, the travel times make no sense. Think LA traffic times 1,000. and here you are. So other than that random, dumb pet peeve, I think Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi is a good book. I think if you are expecting a normal YA love story, it's not that. And I feel like there should be, I don't know, I don't think it's a YA book. It doesn't feel like a young adult book. It doesn't feel like the young adult books I've read before. And a couple of the young adult books I've read this month have not felt like a normal YA book. I don't know what's going on with YA. Apparently it's shifting and changing and turning into something more adult. So these kids are not like in their teens. They're not in high school. They're outside of school. They're in their early 20s. And a lot of the characters are in their early 20s, mid 20s, probably almost 30. And the youngest character is Pop's little brother, Rain. And he's like in middle school. So he doesn't even like, I feel like this book is not like a lot of YA books you've ever read. The romance is far more realistic than I was ready to admit. Like, these characters make hard decisions and kind of go through with them in life. And it doesn't, like, nobody saves anybody, basically. It's just steeped in this interesting reality. The most unreal thing is him meeting Liana Smart, which I found really interesting because, like, the whole book, they're like, this shit should never happen. Like, you should never be able to meet just like a superstar and then fall in love, but it's happening. So I guess we're going along with it. And I like that part of the book too, that they keep commenting on how surreal the premise is. But yeah, Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi came out September 3rd, and it is honestly worth checking out. You can probably get it at your local library or check it out on the Libby app or Hoopla app. If you have access to any of those digital library apps, you can buy it at your local bookstore. And yeah, if you have an indie bookstore, go out and support your indie bookstore. If you guys live in the Inland Empire, check out Celador Books. I know they have it in stock because I was just there yesterday, and I asked them if they had it in stock. And also, shout out to the artist who did the cover work for this book. It is gorgeous. So if you like good artwork, check this book out too. It is a random thing, but I do love artwork. I think we all know that. So yeah, that's the end of this episode 18. If you loved this, go ahead and rate this if you're listening to this to Apple Podcasts. Go ahead and rate and leave a comment. That'd be really dope to see what you think. If you guys have any questions, recommendations, or just want to talk, you can email me at theblackbibliophile@gmail.com. If you want to support the podcast, you can go to the Black Bibliophile podcast at Patreon. We have a book club that if I reach 10 people on the 10 patrons on Patreon, I will start that book club and we can all read and talk about books that won't be mentioned on the podcast. So it'll be separate books from the actual podcast. And is that everything? I do have a fundraiser on Ko-fi to buy more podcast equipment. If you guys would love to contribute to that, that'd be cool. If not, dope. Live your best lives. And yeah, I'll be back next week with a new episode. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.